Everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us and celebrating Shark Awareness Day 2020. I myself am Lawrence Klebeck with Humane Society International. Happy to join you guys tonight, and I'm joined by my colleague, Leo.
G'day everyone, Dr. Leonardo Guida here, or as some people like to call me, Dr. Shark. And again, just to echo Larry's sentiment, it's great to have everyone here on Global Shark Awareness Day. And I can't wait, excuse the pun, but I can't wait to get my teeth stuck into this event and really share my passions and hopefully we all learn a little bit more tonight about sharks and how wonderful they are. Before we get into the questions though, I'll give a brief overview of our Shark Champions campaign. So this is a conservation campaign that's run between ourselves, the Australian Marine Conservation Society, and the Humane Society International. It's a multi-year campaign. It focuses on a nationwide conservation effort across Australia. And AMCS, or the Australian Marine Conservation Society, our role looks at shark conservation from the perspective of sustainable fisheries. So how commercial fishing is impacting our shark and ray populations and what we can do to help protect our sharks and rays. Larry at HSI, they're looking more in a general sense at Australia's shameful shark culling practices and what options and tools we have on the table to really improve beta safety and also look after our wildlife. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Larry and we'll get stuck into it, and Larry can give us a bit of an insight into shark culling before we dive into the questions.
Yeah, thanks, Leo. So as Leo said, what we focus on is the shark culling aspect, the shark control programs that occur in the east coast of this great country, in New South Wales as well as Queensland. So if you can skip forward a couple slides, that's our Shark Champions.
Sorry, I'll just go. So
that's
I'm a bit
okay.
Technologically, all right, let's just start with culling. Go for it. Sorry, mate.
Perfect. Yeah. And so Queensland has the shark control program, and New South Wales runs what's called a shark meshing program. And while New South Wales would say that they don't run a culling program, we all know that those nets aren't meant to be barriers, and they are actually meant to fish down a population of sharks. The idea being the less sharks in the water, the less chance that people have coming and interacting with them, either positively or negatively in this case. But so the fact of the matter is that the shark meshing program is just a euphemism, and these are culling programs by any other name. Leo, you can hop to the next slide.
Sure.
So in Queensland, the shark control program began in the 60s, in 1962, and the technology has changed very little since that time. So as you can see, this consists of 27 nets and 383 lethal drumlines across 86 beaches. So the diagram on the left-hand side is a shark net, and they're installed about 500 meters offshore. They run parallel to the beach, and as I said, they're not meant to be a barrier. They don't stretch headland to headland. They don't even reach from the substrate of the seafloor all the way to the surface. So sharks easily can move in and around, and as I said, they're not a barrier. In fact, 40% of sharks are caught on the beach side, on the shore side of the nets. So it's really important. I'm sure all of you, if you're listening to us tonight, you understand these things, but it's really important for the public to understand that this is not a barrier, and that's one of the many reasons why shark nets are not good at providing public safety. The diagram on the right is that of a drum line, and it's essentially a baited hook on a buoy that's anchored to the seafloor. And so that hook is baited and meant to catch sharks. And on a traditional drum line, those sharks are then killed, and many times they expire on the line. And if they're still alive, then the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries will shoot that animal. Smart drumlines, on the other hand, are exactly like a traditional drumline, only they send a message to a contractor once an animal is hooked, and then that animal is either released at the site, or if it's a large shark, it's then relocated. So a smart drumline is intended to be a non-lethal drumline, and for that reason, our two organizations much prefer the use of smart drumlines, though animal welfare concerns still remain, and I'm sure that some of you guys may have questions about that as we go along. Leo, if you can skip to the next one for me. So there was a landmark court case last year in which my organization, Humane Society International, took the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority to court over the use of lethal drumlines within the boundaries of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. Now we found that we had a space to challenge that. This is actually Exhibit A of that program. This is a small, mostly harmless scalloped hammerhead caught on a drumline. And we felt that the most basic mandate of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority is to preserve the ecological heritage of the Great Barrier Reef. And if you're killing the apex predators, if you're killing these sharks in the Great Barrier Reef, that's a very, very poor way to go about doing that. So we built our case on two arguments. One is that culling sharks in the Great Barrier Reef is detriment to the health of the reef, and culling sharks does not actually aid whatsoever in public safety. And so we were able to prove these 2 points on many different points of evidence on many different levels. And we actually won that court case. Queensland Fisheries had an opportunity to change their program, but they decided to appeal, and we won that appeal as well. There was a long time where the drumlines had to be taken out of the reef, and eventually what the conclusion was, or what the outcome was, is that the drumlines could remain in the reef, but they now have to be managed non-lethally. So they have to be checked more frequently. Smaller sharks such as the scalloped hammerhead would be released immediately. Large sharks would be tagged and relocated instead of shot and killed. Now we are still ironing out some of the details on that with Queensland, but the victory that we can still put in our back pocket and we can hold on to is that an intentional lethal cull is now gone from the Great Barrier Reef, and we're really proud to have achieved that last year. But as I said, there's still a long way to go. There's still nets and drumlines all throughout the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast. Most of those, they go all the way up to Cairns, but most of those are down in southern Queensland. So as a part of Shark Champions, we are working very hard on making substantial changes to those programs to protect these iconic marine species. If you can hop to the next one. And now we have the New South Wales Shark Meshing Program. So there's no drumlines in New South Wales. It's just the nets, but the nets are very destructive as well. As you can see, there's been nets at beaches in Sydney since 1937, and there's been many different iterations of this program. The one that's in currently is 51 nets that go from Newcastle to Wollongong. Again, what I said about those nets in Queensland, these are very similar. They're only 150 meters long. They don't go from the substrate to the surface. And so they definitely don't form a barrier. They catch all kinds of things. They catch whales, dolphins, turtles, rays, and small harmless sharks and things like that. In fact, in the last netting season, only 6% of the catch in the nets were large target sharks, things like bulls, great whites, and tigers. So they catch so much bycatch. They're really a terrible drain on our iconic marine species, and they don't even do enough to they don't even do anything at all to protect swimmers while they're in the water. Some things that we can do to protect swimmers in the water, I know this is a question that many of you may know already, and some may be asking, are things like drone surveillance. So non-lethal alternatives where we can spot sharks in the water, we can alert bathers to their presence, and sometimes we can post on social media. There's Shark Smart apps, so people can make informed decisions about when and where they enter the water. So that goes very closely hand in hand with things like education. The more we know about shark behavior, we know more about the things that they like and ways that they find highly successful feeding opportunities. So things like if you see bait fish jumping, you probably should be entering the water. Things like swimming alone or at dawn or at dusk. You know, these are generally recognized as feeding times for some of these animals. So there's a lot that we can do with education as well. Going a little bit further on taking some of that responsibility onto yourself, there's also things like personal shark deterrents that are becoming better and better and more independently and scientifically proven to be effective. Things like Ocean Guardian Shark Shield and things like that. So there's a plethora of ways that we can protect ourselves in the ocean that don't involve killing sharks, that are better at protecting people. And that's really what we're working on with Shark Champions as information that we're disseminating to the public, that we're trying to get the government to understand, the state governments and the federal government, to really move these programs in a more non-lethal and progressive direction trying to catch them up to where we are today, because these are still using the technologies of the 1930s and the 1960s, and we're here in 2020 now, and we've got the technology, and we should be using that. If you guys want to help out with some of these shark culling initiatives, Leo will tell you about this as well. We got that Shark Champions website, sharkchampions.org.au, where there's all of these petitions. There's a general culling one on there that you can sign to combat the culling practices in both New South Wales and Queensland. And then there's another one specifically for the New South Wales Shark Meshing Program. So if you guys are keen to help out with that, you can sign those petitions. And yes, they do really help Leo and I in what we do is signing those petitions. So any help we can get from you guys, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to hand it over to Leo to talk to you guys a little bit about the work we do with fisheries.
Cool. Thanks, Larry. Before we dive into the Australian context, globally, a third of all shark and ray species are faced with the threat of extinction. And this is the highest form of marine life other than reef coral. So they really are in a bit of strife. In Australia, we have problems in our own backyard that we really need to address. Just this week, we learned that the school shark was critically endangered. And in Australia, its populations are down about 90%. And to make matters worse, we can legally fish it, and it's often sold as a generic term called flake in Australian fish and chip shops. So many Australians are probably unwittingly eating critically endangered species. So Australian fisheries really do need a lot of work to happen here in our backyard. But in terms of the campaign, one thing we have been working on and will continue to work on quite extensively is the issue with Queensland's East Coast fisheries. So Queensland's East Coast fishery operates the entire length and breadth of the Great Barrier Reef, and it's predominantly a net fishery. And one species that's in particular strife is the critically endangered scalloped hammerhead. Now, across the world, this species is really under the pump. It's been driven to extinction because of fishing for its meat and also its highly prized fins. In Australia, very much the same reason, it's flesh. And yes, we still do legally trade in shark fins as well. In the Queensland context, as you can see in this diagram here, the 2018 data, nearly 6,500 scalloped hammerheads were caught along the East Coast. And of those that were caught, nearly 2,500 were dumped overboard, dead or effectively dying. The thing is with scalloped hammerheads, they're really sensitive to capture. And even if they do survive when they're thrown back, only about 2 in 10 of them are actually going to live. They're super sensitive. And the reason why they're so vulnerable is because of the shape of their head. Basically, the way nets operate is that although they don't really select for the type of animal that gets caught, they select for the size of the animal. So with regards to fish, depending on the size of the net itself, smaller fish in theory can swim through it. Fish that are too big bounce off it, and the size that you want get caught. Well, as you can see with the scalloped hammerhead's head, it's going to get caught regardless of the size of it, and that's what makes it particularly vulnerable in Queensland. And as you can see here, quote by the IUCN Red List, it's quite firm actually, which is intriguing, and that is it recommends that all scalloped hammerhead retention and landing, so basically whenever they're kept or they're brought back to port for sale, be prohibited. And at the very least, for as long as the global population is classified as critically endangered or endangered. So basically the IUCN is saying this species should not be fished anywhere in the world. And if you want to help us out and get these big industrial nets out of the reef, and just to give you a bit of a snapshot again, these nets are about 1.2 kilometres long and they're fishing in the Great Barrier Reef. And it's not just sharks they catch, they're invisible in the water and they catch turtles, dolphins and dugongs. And these nets, for a bit of size relevance, it works out to be about like 90 odd transport buses, your buses you see on the road length to length, or about 4 Eiffel Towers tipped over side by side. So they're absolutely huge. And in the comments, you'll see that there's a petition as well. And you can join, I think for last count, it might be nearly 20,000 people, if not definitely over 10,000 people in trying to get these nets out. And fingers crossed, we're able to do that as we move forward. Another thing we're working on is our true blue Aussie battlers. And these are our species, when I say true blue, these are our species that are endemic to Australia. They're found nowhere else in the world. And as you can see on the slide there, Australia is a biodiversity hotspot for sharks and rays. We've got a quarter of the world's species, which works out to be about 322. And of those 322, half are endemic. They're found nowhere else in the world. So if we can't save them, no one can. It's that simple. And a lot of these species are under threat. So you'll see here in this map of Australia, the take-home message, I'm just going to see if this pointer thing works. Oh, there we go. There we go. The take-home message here is that it's this particular hotspot here in Southeast Australia where most of our chondrichthyans, so chondrichthyans is the scientific term for cartilaginous fish, and these include sharks, rays, and ghost fish. So for our sharks and rays, the hotspot where they're facing the most risk of extinction in terms of the number of species is here in the southeast. So you're looking at southeast Queensland up into the Great Barrier Reef a little bit, and definitely along the northern New South Wales coast and in towards Victoria. A lot of the fishing that happens here is trawl fishing, so it scoops up from the seafloor, and there's also elements of net and hook fishing as well. So the take-home message here, in terms of our endemics and species we really need to look after and where we should prioritise our actions, is down in this corner here, and it's something we're working on, and you'll see Shark Champion in the future showcasing these wonderful species that you probably haven't heard of, such as the white fin swell shark. And this is a shark, it's my personal favourite. It's one that lives about 500 metres, I think, from memory, below the surface. And anyway, when it's under threat, it literally swallows water to make itself look bigger and more threatening and a lot harder to eat. So we've got a lot of quirky characters in our waters that we really need to look after, and that's something we'll be working on moving forward. That being said, we've got a brief overview. We're now going to throw the floor open to any questions, and there's no such thing as a silly question, just a really silly answer. So by all means, whatever's on your mind, if it's something on the news today, such as the shark bite up in Queensland, and you want to get more information about that, if it's something about endangered species being eaten, fire away. Anything you want, let's go for it. And I'll just wait for some of these questions to load in the comments. Okay. In the meantime, while we're waiting, I'll just get rid of this screen here. Stop that there. And we should have, here we go. We've got some questions coming through now.
All right, Leo, what have we got?
No questions just yet. So perhaps people are still thinking about it. I don't know, Larry, do you want to give us a bit of insight into what happened today in North Queensland? Perhaps provide some information around the situation, what it means, broadly speaking, for our safety.
Yeah, absolutely would be happy to. I know it's going to be a big talking point, especially because there's been a few incidents over the last few weeks. And for those of you in the shark world, the way that Leo and I like to talk about what the public sees as shark attacks is we like to call them shark-human incidents, and that's not Leo and I downplaying the fact that some of these are very tragic and extremely traumatic in some cases, but it's a more accurate term of what's happening when a shark bites someone. The vast majority of the time, it's not as a direct feeding opportunity. It's more of a shark investigating its surroundings, and especially when the water is murky or there's other environmental conditions that prohibit the shark from clearly seeing its target. Its best sense is taste, and that's the way that it can figure out what's in front of it. Unfortunately for us, getting bitten by a shark even one time can, as I said, sometimes be very traumatic and tragic. But you will hear, if you heard Leo and I either on the radio or on television or even on the internet with the things that we write, the reason why we say a human shark incident is because that more accurately reflects what has happened. An attack presupposes an idea that the shark had a plan or was purposefully sneaking up on a target, and like I said, vast majority of the time that is inaccurate. So that's why it's important to use the correct terminology when talking about these incidents, like a shark incident like there was today. And so the unfortunate young woman, it sounds like she was bit on the ankle. She is in stable condition. Um, Ironically, apparently she was in the process of filming a shark documentary, and she's very much a shark lover. And I think Leo and I know her through maybe 1 or 2 degrees of separation. I know we have friends of friends that actually know this person, but she does seem to be in good spirits and okay, which is obviously very thankful, considering what we know about these incidents, like what just happened over this last weekend. And Leo,
Awesome.
if you want to
Yeah,
add something.
sorry to cut you off, Larry. We've now got some
All
questions
good.
that have come through. Shannon Hurley has asked, what has been each of your favourite shark encounters? I'll let you go first, Larry.
I used to live in North Queensland, and I was diving on a shipwreck called the Yongala, and after our dives and we were back up on the boat, a cheeky whale shark came up and bumped our boat, and so we all got to jump back in the water and swim around with it for a while. And it would swim off for a while, and then it would come back and circle the boat a few more times. It was very, very curious, very, very gentle, and it was just so amazing to be in the water with something so enormous and so graceful and beautiful. I would have to say that was my favorite.
I was lucky enough to swim with a whale shark as well, and this was in South Africa by sheer chance. The dive operator didn't even believe me until I showed him my GoPro footage. That same trip, swam with a great white shark, which was just absolutely phenomenal. But funnily enough, my favourite experience was when I was doing research down in Victoria, and as part of my research, I had to dive and collect southern fiddler rays. So they're this beautiful ray that's about a metre and a half long, and they look like half a shark, half a ray. And anyway, I had to collect pregnant females and actually give them ultrasounds and watch their pregnancy, and actually looked after them in the tanks in the aquarium until they gave birth. And through that whole experience over the months, I really connected with the species in quite an unexplainable way. And it really gave me appreciation for those species that a lot of people probably aren't aware of, other than the ones you typically see in the movies. And it was deeply moving to watch a pregnant ray go through pregnancy, give birth, and then have the opportunity to release them back into the wild. Nikita asks, do you know the population of great whites worldwide? I can rattle this one off.
Go for it.
Yeah, so worldwide, it's a bit tricky, but in Australia at least, the latest genetic technology called close kin is actually helping us count the number of sharks. And that's basically sampling sharks and going, okay, how related are each of the individual sharks? So are they brothers, are they sisters, are they cousins, and so forth? And then by this, you can work out, okay, how many have the same mum? And you kind of extrapolate and work out a general sense of the population. Generally speaking, in the East Coast at least, there's about 5,500. But the interesting thing is that the population itself, since they became protected, has actually stabilised. So we haven't really seen an increase. We haven't really seen a decrease. It's stabilised. And that could be for a variety of reasons. And one of those is that perhaps the juveniles over the past 20 or so years since they've been protected are only really now starting to mature and perhaps reproduce. But the good thing is that because of their protection, we've been able to halt their decline. Heather Hill has asked, shark bite in Queensland, Fraser Island saying possibly GT or red bass, a bit of a different bite size. Why is it so unknown right now? I have to apologise. I'm not too sure what he's meant by a GT or a red bass.
GT is a giant trevally. Does he mean the Fitzroy or because there was one at Fraser Island and today's was at Fitzroy Island up in Cairns.
Yeah, I think this one's referring to Fraser Island. Look, unfortunately, I'm not quite sure what the question is, but I suppose, Larry, do you know much about bite sizes and victims and how they determine what shark it might or might not be?
I think the question is asking is maybe whether it was a fish or a shark, but no, I actually don't know if it was a fish or a shark, but yeah, generally, for those of us that know about some of these incidents, they use what's called bite radius and certain indentations and the setup of the teeth when they look at the wound, and through that, researchers that know a little bit more about a shark's jaws than myself will be able to accurately identify exactly what species was the culprit. As far as new information about the incident today, your guess is as good as mine. I don't really know enough about that, what happened today. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. Big fish can cause painful bites as well. So it could have definitely been that.
Katrina, I've got another one for you. Katrina Marchants asked, were many shark species nominated for consideration for this year's revision of the EPBC? So for those who aren't aware, the EPBC Act is essentially Australia's national environment law. And Larry, yeah, have we nominated any species? And if so, what's perhaps one that people might find intriguing?
Yeah, right. Okay, that's a great question. So for the 2 years that we've had Shark Champions running, we've had an ongoing 4 species nominated each year. So each year we choose a different species and we look at how the population's going, whether or not it already has some state protection, and by that we choose which species we want to nominate for listing. This year we've nominated coal cluff shark, a small deep water shark off the coast of Queensland. We've nominated Sydney skate. We've nominated for uplisting, which will increase the protection because some of them are some of the sawfish in North Queensland and Northern Territory, as well as Leo, can you help me out? Eastern angel shark, which is a bottom-dwelling ambush hunter.
The green-eyed spur dog there as well?
That's right, and the green-eyed spur dog. And those were the 4 from this year. And from the previous year, the whitefin swell shark, which Leo said was one of his favorites already, that was nominated last year. We nominated the narrow sawfish, which is the smallest species of sawfish up in Northern Australia. We've nominated the gray skate and the long-nosed skate. So those are 2 other deep water skate species that get caught often in a lot of these trawl fisheries. So those are the 8 species that we've nominated over the last 2 years. We've got a further list of things that we can target as our campaign goes forward. But yeah, join up in Shark Champions. We always send out little emails here and there about these species that were nominated, and we'd love to tell you a little bit more about all of them.
Cool. Daniel Barnforth has asked, when headlines in papers, especially in the US, state things like, quote unquote, sharks lurking off coast, end quote, does the media need to change their reporting to downplay their fear factor? Sharks don't lurk in their own environment. My thoughts are the media has quite a responsible, quite an important role to play, and that they do have to be responsible in their reporting. It's nice to see, I've noticed particularly over the past year especially, that journalists are tending to report a lot more accurately around shark bite incidences. But as far as headlines go, yeah, I would like to see words like lurk to remove, because at the end of the day, a shark isn't hiding in a corner waiting to pounce on you. It's just doing its thing. But the good thing is that a lot of journalists really do want to report as best as they can, and they really are open to conversation with experts and scientists about the use of language. But at the same time, we also respect the fact that media being media also have to create a punchy headline. So it really is a fine balance, but I reckon we can still improve too. Alrighty, we've got Lynn McLaren's asked, the WA Labor government has persisted in an expensive smart drumline program under the guise of a scientific trial. Tell us what good shark science looks like. I'll let you start with that, Larry, since you've been working extensively with culling and smart drumlines and whatnot.
Yeah. So as I touched on earlier, the way we feel about smart drumlines is a very nuanced position. So obviously they're expensive. They do create animal welfare concerns, and it's still a bloody great baited hook right off our beaches. So it is not an ideal solution. However, when we're working with governments to try to move away from very deadly practices like lethal drumlines or the shark nets, we accept a trial of smart drumlines in place of one of those as a progressive movement towards a completely non-lethal program. Now, having said that, smart drumlines can be used for science. Yes, absolutely. As sharks are caught and tagged and relocated, we learn a little bit more about their movements. And the more we know about the shark behavior, the better we can do at protecting people in the water, and so on and so forth. So they can be useful and important research tools. However, like I said, they are expensive and they are an animal welfare concern. So there has to be a trigger point at what we say. Okay, this is helpful science, and this is not necessarily. And I absolutely agree that there needs a line to be drawn when we talk about smart drum lines. And maybe Leo can touch in a little bit more about how smart drum lines can, how using a smart drum line can be scientifically beneficial, and where it just becomes kind of overkill and almost a misallocation of funds, because it is truly an expensive program.
Yeah, so with regards to smart drum lines, in terms of the information they provide, that can be quite useful. And that is sharks that are caught get attached with either a satellite tag or an acoustic tag, or both. And what that shows is with the satellite tags and the acoustic tags, we learn where sharks move, how often they move in certain areas, the depths they swim at. We get a wealth of information from this. And as Larry touched on, smart drum lines, yes, they give us a great amount of scientific information, but at the same time, you don't always get bang for buck. With the WA trials, I think from memory, they've only caught, I think, 2 or 3 white sharks, I think maybe 2 thus far in the year and a half or so that they've been operating. And when you consider that this is a program designed to target white sharks, and it's cost $20-odd million, I think at last count, you think, and all you really get from that is a couple of white sharks, when in fact, a better targeted design program could include, like what dedicated shark researchers do. And yes, shark researchers work with the fisheries department, but for simplicity's sake, the smart drumline program is run by a fisheries department. So let's say we ran a shark tagging program with, say, a university or an institution as such. A shark tagging program, I think, would be significantly cheaper. You'd be able to fund more people, more researchers, and the tagging process would be very different in terms of targeting the shark and handling the shark and getting out there in a quick enough time. So the other drawback, aside from financial, is the time. So with smart drum lines, if the weather patterns change and you can't get out there quick enough, that shark is dangling and could potentially die. So in short, smart drum lines, we get great information, but we really should consider how we spend that money. And I would say that there are better ways to do it with a dedicated tagging program that perhaps doesn't necessarily use smart drum lines as a tool. Moving on, Nikita asks, are there any volunteer opportunities for marine bio students to work with sharks in Australia? And how would we find out about these? Thanks. Difficult to say, especially at the moment with COVID. Unfortunately, a lot of researchers have been put on hold and their projects have been put on hold. But generally speaking, the best way to do it, if you're on Twitter, there's a lot of shark scientists you can follow, even if you just put in the hashtag shark, and just get in touch with them directly. Say, hey, I'm interested. What are my options? You could also try directly contacting universities, although it's a bit of a random shot as to where to go. So I would probably suggest hop on Twitter, get in contact with a shark scientist directly, and you can find them using a hashtag shark. Even just email myself at AMCS, and if I hear of any projects, I'm happy to say, look, contact this person. That's probably the best way to go about it. But yeah, it's going to be particularly challenging now with COVID and everything kind of being put on hold. Did you have anything to add? I think you did a few marine biology programs as well, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, don't give up. I mean, it's stay persistent. If you find a research project that really ticks all your passions, that really excites you, then start a conversation with that person. And I'm not sure how old this person is, but if you're in high school or early uni, do what you can in your local area just to build up a solid science foundation. Even if your end goal is working with sharks or marine mammals or a lot of things that marine biologists do, a lot of the successful researchers build a strong science foundation. So go volunteer in any bio lab that's at your school, high school or university, and pipette a couple things a few hours a week, because we all have to at some point learn how to do something like that in science. And once you build up that real strong science foundation, then you can bring those skills and you can be a definite added value to any research group or any laboratory in any university. And that would be my suggestion.
Sorry, Larry, I've just realized technical issue and my battery is looking like it's failing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I actually think I've forgotten my charger. So how's that, guys, for technical issues? I'll just see how much time my battery says we've got.
It's all right. No
okay, we
worries
should have more than enough time. We might just cut it a bit short for about 10 minutes. If we don't get to your question online, what we'll do is I'll make sure that both Larry and I answer your questions through writing over the next few days when we get a chance to get to it. But just while we've got a bit more time, I might, let's see, what can we have here? Okay. Can you ensure your flake at the local fish and chip shop is not vulnerable species of sharks? This is from Chloe Preston. Do fish and chip shop owners in Australia have to label their flake, and where does it come from? So the thing is with flake and shark meat at a fish and chip shop is that flake should only refer to gummy shark from either New Zealand or Australia, full stop. However, flake has been used as an umbrella term since about the 1920s. And it's just basically any fish and chip shop you go to, they say flake and it's shark meat, and there's no legal obligation to actually call it what species it is. So in short, you can't really tell. And on top of that, your fishmonger or the person who owns the fish and chip shop, they probably don't know either. They're probably not aware. They probably get the delivery coming to them as flake because, and then this is the thing, the information is lost somewhere in the supply chain, because at the end of the day, when fishers catch sharks and they land them on their boat, they have to record what species it is. So between that situation and you eating it, the information is lost somewhere. So one of the best solutions to this is to enforce accurate seafood labeling. That's something we're going to be working on, not necessarily as a Shark Champions campaign at the moment, but it's something we're ticking away in the background, because ultimately to get that law changed, the reality is it's probably going to take a few years. But whilst that's happening, in the meantime, sharks like the school shark and the scalloped hammerhead, they need the breathing space. So the most immediate thing we can do is actually stop fishing for these sharks to start with. And one thing you can do, and this will be put in the comments, is you can download the Good Fish app. And what that does is it allows you to search for sustainable alternatives that you could perhaps order instead of flake.
Leo, if I can jump in, I see a question I'd like to take.
Yeah, go for it.
Andrew Newenoff, and I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. The New South Wales government says its smart drumlines are not a shark mitigation tool. Why then did it put 6 of those drumlines as soon as that 15-year-old boy was tragically killed while surfing at Woolleye last week? Yeah, exactly. I've had the same conversation with the Department of Primary Industries this week. And honestly, it's all about visibility. When you see, if you're not used to using, if you're not a normal ocean user, if you go to the beach, once every 6 months, and you see buoys out there that say, hey, there's a shark net, or there's drum lines out there, or there's these smart drum lines, you feel something a little bit safer. I know that's going to be weird. That's going to be strange to hear for this audience, because I know a lot of the people that would tap in and follow along with this Facebook Live event are those of us that love these these animals and understand what it's like. But for a lot of people, they need that. They really depend on that visibility, and the government wants to be seen like they're doing something about it, whether or not they actually are. Like exactly in this case, when the government says it's not a shark mitigation tool, it's a research tool. And I think that's why we're stuck where we are with shark culling in Australia, is that the majority of us understand that these programs aren't effective at protecting people, and all they're doing is killing our iconic marine wildlife. But yet they're still in place, and there's really a logical disconnect between the two, and it's all about visibility, and it's all about governments wanting to be seen to do something. And the way that we change that is we encourage our politicians, we educate our politicians to show a little courage, to show a little integrity, and move these programs in a progressive direction. And I think, and I really hope that we're getting to a threshold in this argument, in this issue, where we're actually crossing into that. But that's definitely a great question, Andrew. So thank you for bringing that up.
Cool. I reckon we've got time for one more before we wrap it up. Was there one in particular that stood out for you, Larry, that you want to have a crack at?
Oh yeah. Let me have a quick look.
There's so many good ones to choose from.
Yeah, there is. Oh, Jonathan Clark, our friend from Sea Shepherd, has a good question. Is there anything you can share with regards to the Queensland government has changed its practices in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park since your win in the courts, which changed the permit for the Queensland Shark Control Program to operate there? So as I touched on, after that court win, the thing that we could hold on to and be happy about is that the program is at least legally and officially non-lethal. But we look at the catch statistics, and for those of us that do what Leo, I, and what Jonathan at Sea Shepherd does, we look at these statistics very frequently, and we're noticing that it doesn't seem to be that much has changed, and a lot of it has been a return to business as usual, which is definitely concerning. We are currently looking into a legal recourse to follow up with that. But as it sits right now, so those drumlines went back in the Great Barrier Reef in February, and they're supposed to be non-lethal. And yet 68 sharks have been caught on drumlines since February in the Great Barrier Reef, and 66 have been killed. So their non-lethal program is operating at a 97% death rate. And I don't think under any definition of non-lethal that is at all acceptable. So I'll tell you what I keep telling myself. Our organizations are doing everything we can about it. We've at least won in the court, so we've got the backing of the Federal Court of Australia, and we've just got to really hold the hot irons to the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries and do everything we can to clean up their act, because they are not acting in accordance of those court orders. So help us out, everyone. Sign on to Shark Champions, become a Shark Champion with us. Sign on those petitions, because we really need all the help we can get to turn this tide. And thank you for the question, Jonathan.
Cool. All right, we might start wrapping it up there. And again, apologies, guys, for the technical difficulties. It's solely my fault for forgetting my damn laptop charger at work. I take full responsibility for that. But as I said, we will get to every single question, make sure they're informed, and we'll also leave our general contact details if you want to have a chat to us moving forward about any issues or anything you might want to learn about. But if you just bear with me, I'll just share my screen again so you can see some details. So what we can do here is, again, just to wrap up for those who have just joined us or who hadn't heard earlier, in the comments, you'll see there's several petitions that you can sign to help us out. But as I said, you can also just visit sharkchampions.org.au. There's some very general information about the status of sharks in the world, how fisheries impact them, where New South Wales and Queensland stand in terms of shark culling. And the website will be updated shortly to have a few more resources available to you as well. In saying that, something that's perhaps some would say a bit more practical or hands-on, if you do want to source sustainable seafood and choose options that enable you to enjoy a good feed of seafood, and I personally enjoy seafood myself, you can download the Good Fish app, and that'll be in the comments as well. And you can choose a range of species to inform your choices. And the other thing we've got here on the AMCS website and the HSI website is a range of really cool shark posters. So we've got a series of 12 posters that highlight some of the lesser known species and give you some quick fire.
Oh, did we lose Leo? All right, well, I guess that means that I'll close everything up, guys. If you're still with me. Yeah, so hop onto that website, guys, the sharkchampions.org.au. Thank you so much for joining us this evening on Shark Awareness Day 2020. Apologies for the technical difficulties, but thanks for hanging in there, everyone. If you got, Leo and I will be answering as many of those questions as we can and posting them on this event page. So thank you, everyone who wrote in a question. If you have anything more for us, feel free to email me at lawrence at hsi.org.au. Happy to field any of those questions. Thanks again so much, guys, for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful Shark Awareness Day. Stay safe out there, everyone. And thank you, and have a great evening. See ya.